Today I want to talk about the Gateless barrier, case 28. Is this the right one? Yeah. Ringing along with Lungtan's fame. Deshan visited Lungtan and questioned him sincerely far into the night. It grew late, and Lungtan said, "Why don't you retire?" Deshan made his bows and lifted the blinds to withdraw, but was met by darkness. Turning back, he said, "It's dark outside." Lungtan lit a paper candle and handed it to Deshan. Deshan was about to take it when Lungtan blew it out. At this, Deshan had a sudden realization and made bows. Lungtan said, "What truth did you see?" Deshan said, "From now on I will not doubt the words of an old priest who is renowned everywhere under the sun." The next day, Lungtan took the high seat before his assembly and said, "I see a brave fellow among you monks. His fangs are like a sword tree. His mouth is like a blood bowl. Give him a blow and he won't turn his head. Someday he will climb the highest peak and establish our way there." Deshan brought his notes and commentaries on the Diamond Sutra before the Dharma Hall and held up a torch, saying, "Even though you have exhausted the abstruse doctrines, it is like placing a hair in vast space. Even though you have learned all the secrets of the world, it is like letting a single drop of water fall into an enormous valley." And he burned up all his papers. Then, making his bows, he took leave of his teacher. Give me 3 bells, please. Part of the reason that I wanted to talk about this case today, well, one reason is it's the next case, but part of the reason that I particularly like this case and I wanted to talk about it is because something, I think I talked about it last week maybe, but something that's been really, I've been thinking a lot about lately is really recontextualizing how we approach koan practice and the gateless barrier and kind of all of these old teachings. For many years, I've always used and approached koan practice as translating the word koan as it's often translated, like a public case. And if you've heard me talk about koans, I often talk about them in this way, and I explain like this is the term was used in the legal system in China, public case. And in a lot of ways, it's what we use in the West when we say the word legal precedent. And sometimes it's not really easy to put into words the specifics of how a law functions, but through case law, by referring to specific cases, you can have a look at what transpired in that particular legal interaction. And by doing that, you start to get a clear understanding of what the law is pointing to, or how the law is being demonstrated in those cases. And that's true, even in koan practice, it's very true that that's what's going on. And that's, I think, one side of it. So I want us to sort of hold on to that understanding. But there's another aspect, I think, of koan practice which has been really churning with me for the past few months, and that is that we, in our tradition, we call it a tradition, first of all, and in our tradition, when we practice for a certain amount of time, or we've done a certain amount of intensive practice, we have the opportunity to do jukai, to take refuge, to receive the sila. And when we do that, that ceremony, the language of the ceremony, the documentation of the ceremony, it all points to becoming a part of something. And the language that we use in those ceremonies is family language. We use ancestors, and we talk about patriarchs, and we talk about Dharma brothers and sisters. And the term that's used, kechimyaku, for the lineage that you receive when you receive the sila, literally means bloodline. And so from the beginning of our tradition, the Buddha's disciples, people who became the Buddha's disciples, were often referred to as Shakyans. And in some places, instead of using a last name, an ordainee, a monk, would be called Shakya, because they were considered, having left home, they've become a part of Shakya family. So Siddhartha's family, the Shakyans, the Buddhists. They didn't call them Buddhists then, they just called them the Shakyans. So the other way that is really important, I think, to understand and to explore these is that these characters, we have to engage with these koans, and we have to engage with the stories, and we have to engage with the interactions that are going on here as our family's stories. And this has really been sort of rolling around inside me for the past few months, particularly, I think, because I've been getting back involved with theater, the theater world, really understanding the common relationship between koan literature and theater, which is to say that they are both originate with a very simple way of experiential teaching, oral teaching. It's an oral history. They're stories in which something very important is being taught, but they're both they're unified on the understanding and the principle that you can't just tell somebody something. Well, you can, I suppose. You can just tell somebody something. But just like a story in which it tells you everything, it's very moralizing, nobody likes those stories. And you pretty easily forget those stories because it's like, okay, can you bash me over the head a little bit more with that? It doesn't transform you. But these stories where oftentimes you hear the story or you watch the story happen, and you're sort of left with this kind of like, what the hell just happened there? What was that about? I don't really understand it. And it's the process of sort of like chewing that story that an understanding or a realization or an experience comes about as a result of the experience and of putting yourself into the happening of the story that's going on. And so as I was thinking about this, and I've been thinking about sort of like, how do I bring sort of the practice of theater, which is also transformative, into Zen? How do I share that? I was looking at different cases that really have that kind of aspect of experiential storytelling. And one of the things that really came up is the koans are sort of like, for most people I think, koans are sort of like watching one episode in a really long Netflix series. And it's like all of the characters in the series they've been in the series for like their whole lifetimes. And they're all related to other people who have all been in the series for hundreds of years. And so unless we sort of get into the series and start watching it, maybe we start at the beginning and watch the whole series, it's like what you get out of any individual episode is really limited by that, because you're really not clear on what the motivations of the people who are in the episode are, what their background is, what their history is, how they've changed over time. And for somebody who's like a really avid sort of like series watcher, the smallest thing, they get a haircut, they do the smallest gesture, they don't take sugar in their coffee, it's like that might be a really big frickin' deal, right? Like, holy cow, that happened. But the person who's just sort of like flipping it on because they're bored and they just want to watch this episode, it doesn't have the same sort of resonance. And so when I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, I need to think of a case like that really can illustrate some of these points. And I was like, okay, well, what case are we on? And as often happens when I'm dealing with koans, it's like sort of that one's a good one. So we have this example of these two priests talking, and one of them's being the older, the master is being questioned sincerely late into the night. And then there's this kind of interaction. It's dark outside. Oh, here, have a candle. And then something happens. Well, why did that happen? What was the thing that was realized? And then the next day, there's this whole interaction where the master goes in the seat and says, yes, there's a guy here that's really got it. And he's going to be a great sort of example for people in the future because he really has, the description of him is it's very macho, but I think we can break it down. I see a brave fellow among you monks. His fangs are like a sword tree. His mouth is like a blood bowl. Give him a blow and he won't turn his head. Someday he will climb the highest peak and establish our way there. And you think, all of this from like blowing out like a little paper candle? Like, wow, that's amazing. And then Deshan brings up all these books in front of the Dharma hall and lights them on fire and makes this big. So it's sort of like if you're just watching that episode, you can understand why people are so totally baffled by koan practice, because there's a bunch of really bizarre behavior. And I think that it's those kinds of things, this kind of approach to Zen, it's like that's really been problematic in North America, in North America's approach to Zen. It's like if somebody, I don't know, watched like 2 episodes of Star Trek or something like that, and then tried to like replicate the lifestyle based on those 2 episodes. Anyone who's really sort of been a fan of that would watch that and go like, this person's just crazy, right? They're mocking, or they're mimicking some things, and probably I can even tell you which episodes that they've watched, but they don't know about this and they don't know about that. And that's what you see in this, is you see a bunch of really bizarre sort of cryptic behavior, but you don't see the depth of the family story that goes on behind it. You don't understand about these characters. Now, in this case, there's a whole history, but even in the history, it refers back. So I'm gonna read the Wumen's comment, because he gives a little bit of background. So we have this strange episode. Lungtan is the old master. Deshan is the young guy. I've got a mind to like get you guys up and act, but okay, I'll spare you this week. Maybe we'll do it in the next section. Before Deshan crossed the barrier from his native province, his mind burned and his mouth sputtered. Full of arrogance, he went south to exterminate the doctrine of a special transmission outside the sutras. Sudden awakening is really the teaching that he was bent on destroying. When he reached the road to Lizhou, he sought to buy refreshments from an old woman. So this is a story. Why? Why is this guy angry, and why is his mind burning and his mouth sputtering, and why does he want to go and exterminate the doctrine of sudden awakening or the special transmission outside the sutras? Well, that's a story. And for that we have to go back to I think most of you have been around long enough. So in the Platform Sutra, the patriarch Huineng talks about his story in which he showed up at the monastery, this barbarian from the south and unwashed, and shows up, and the master called him a jungle rat, and he had an interaction with the teacher where the teacher went, oh, this guy's actually got some pretty serious insight, but if I say anything about it, all these monks that have been practicing here for 20 years are going to be pissed. So we need to put him in a corner, get him to pound rice or something like that, and, he can sort of like refine himself and make him look more like a monk and like get more related to the people here. It didn't really go that way. Hung Jen started to get really old, and he said, I need to pass this along. And he had a disciple named Shen Su, I think his name was, and he had the whole poetry writing contest. You remember this one where he said, I want to transmit, and I want everyone to write a verse, and whoever's got the best verse is going to become my successor. Well, this head disciple, who was really known for being really assiduous and forthright, and he was just the leader of the whole community, everyone kind of said, well, he should really be the guy, and he's going to write one, and mine's not going to be any good, and so nobody basically wrote it. And Shen Su even didn't write one because he was like, the pressure of this is too much, and like, I don't think I'm worthy of this, and all this kind of stuff. So he went and he wrote a verse in the middle of the night on a wall. And it was all about continuously and gradually practicing the Dharma and the tradition in order to polish the mirror of the mind, was the essential sort of thrust of his poem. And Huineng, and so the master came out and they looked at this poem, and he sort of went, okay, he could see through the poem and he could see what the insight of the person who wrote it was. And he probably knew who wrote it just because of the circumstance. Everyone else kind of deferred to Shen Su, and so he, in order to put on a good show and be a sport about it, he said, "This is a very worthwhile verse, and we should all venerate this, and we should all try to practice this way." And they burnt incense, and he did these prostrations and all this kind of stuff. And Huineng heard about it. This jungle rat, who's still a layperson, pounding rice in the sort of mill, and he was illiterate, and so he asked someone to go with him and show him the verse, and he read it, and he also sort of saw the issue with it, or saw the problem with it, and so he asked the person that he brought with him to write a verse underneath it, his verse, and his verse was, there is no stand, there is no mirror, and the mind is essentially empty, so where can there be dust for you to clean off? And that was sort of the verse. And everyone who saw it kind of saw that it was superior. And Hung Jen when he saw it, he also knew who wrote it. And so everyone in the monastery was like, who wrote it? Who wrote it? And Hongzhen called Huineng to his room and gave him taught him all night. And then at the end of that, he transmitted the robe and the bowl, and then escorted him to the river and said, hide. Because when the other people know that this has gone on, they're going to want to kill you, basically. They're not going to accept you as the sixth patriarch, and they're going to want you dead. And so he ran off, which led to another case, which is in here as well. Now that's, on the one hand, that's the Southern school, the sudden awakening school's story. And we have that story in the Zen school because the Northern school, this gradual practice school, didn't really survive. So what's important to understand is that at this time, there were two sides of that story. And part of the reason that the monks on the other side wanted to chase him down was they really felt like Huineng was a bamboozler, and he pulled the wool over the master's eyes. He stole the robe and bowl, and he took off to spread this false dharma. He was just some upstart who showed up. He was kind of clever. He had some witty answers, but he didn't really understand Zen. He took off with the robe and bowl, and he started his own school, this sudden awakening one where you don't have to practice so much. It's just about, the awakening spontaneously arising and being able to, be enlightened in the world and all this kind of stuff. So at the time, later, after Hongzhen died, all those monks started following Shensu as well. And so there was this rift between the gradual practice school and the sudden awakening school. And there is a very methodical, ritualized, specific form of practice in Shensu's school, and there was a more spontaneous, dynamic style that developed through Huineng's school. Now, at the time, which was the legitimate school, or which was the true school, or who was the true patriarch? This was a matter of serious contention between these two schools. The disciples of Huineng absolutely maintained the veracity of him as being the sixth patriarch, and of course the followers of Shensu also said, they maintained this guy is essentially a criminal. He's from the south, he was illiterate, and he runs off with the robe and bowl and pretends to be the sixth patriarch. So this was a serious issue. And so what we have here is Deshan is a person who has trained in the Northern school. And he's probably, at this time, he's like 30 years old maybe, but he is a stellar mind. And he is acknowledged like a genius. And so his particular field of study and practice is on the investigation of the Diamond Sutra. And he's been invited all over the place to different temples and stuff as a representative of that particular school. And he lectures on the Diamond Sutra. He's an expert. And he goes about, and he's written many commentaries, and he probably gives them out at all the places that he talks. And he's written lots of probably verses and rebuttals of Southern school examinations of the Diamond Sutra and all this kind of stuff. And he travels around with this cart full of his writing on the Diamond Sutra. So he's like PhD, trying to prove himself and trying to stamp out what he feels is an utterly false doctrine, that you can arrive at this just spontaneously without serious cultivation of the mind and body. You can become an awakened Buddha, is just nonsense to him. So he goes south with the intention, with the mantle and the burden of his whole school of Buddhism. He feels the truth of Buddhism. He goes to the south in order to set things straight, to stamp out this lie, this bad teaching that's starting to take root in southern China. And so I'm just picturing him with this like little wheel cart. It's like, it's like got two handles, and it comes out behind him, and it's just loaded with like books. And books were not a small thing then, like books and scrolls and all that kind of stuff. Little wheel on the back, and he's walking with a big hat. Real, confident. They use the term here, arrogance. But for me, it's like, this is something that we need to investigate. He's absolutely sure of his position. He's absolutely sure of his perspective. He's absolutely sure about what he's doing and why he's doing it. He's good, and he's right, and he's righteous. And so he's tired, and so he stops, and on the road to Liju, he sought to buy some refreshments from an old woman. So he walks into like a little hut that's got tea and cakes and all these kinds of things. And he parks his little wagon down and walks in. And the woman sees clearly this, scholar monk. He's in robes. He's got a wagon full. It's not a hard read. You see the situation. And she says, Your Reverence, what sort of literature do you have there in your cart? What's all that fascinating stuff? In those days, maybe she's illiterate. Maybe she doesn't know, and she has to ask, what's all that neat? Ooh, you must be really important. You're walking around with a lot of books. And Deshan says they're notes and commentaries on the Diamond Sutra. And I'm sure that the way he said this was dismissive. I'm sure that he's standing in a tea hut in the south of China with some uneducated old lady, and he's got all his PhD treatises and all this stuff on the cart, and she asks what it is, and he's like, look, lady, Diamond Sutra, you wouldn't understand it. Can you please give me a cake and a cup of tea? And one of the things that Aitken Roshi talks about this is that the specific kind of cake that he's asking for is, the word for it is like a mind refreshment or heart refreshment. And so he says, give me one of these things. And she responds and says, I hear that the Diamond Sutra says, past mind cannot be grasped. Present mind cannot be grasped. Future mind cannot be grasped. So, which mind is it that you intend to refresh? So, we have a perfect setup here, right? Where we've got this completely confident person who's now speaking down to this person he just has no respect for. She's a lay person. She's clearly not anything to really be considered. But all of a sudden, she's crammed his whole cart into his mouth. and the next line says, Deshan was dumbfounded and unable to answer. And I've heard versions of this story where she says, you can eat for free if you can answer this question. And then he's like, oh. So, unable to answer. He did not expire completely under her words, however, but asked. And this is an important thing because this really relates to the first part of the koan. So he's in this thing, he's completely committed, he knows what he's there to do, but he's in a moment which he's completely unsuspecting. This is not a temple, this isn't a lecture hall, there's no other scholars or priests around. He feels safe, and he's kind of strutting his stuff, and pow, she hits him. And he's completely baffled because this is unprecedented. He doesn't know what's going on. But he doesn't just fall over or run out screaming or cry and grab his books and leave. He has the sense to say, like, where the fuck did you learn that? that's bad, it's bad language, but essentially he says, is there a Zen master near here? So he's like, where did you get that? Like, how did you learn that? Where did you learn that from? Because he knows right away that he's been got. And she says, oh, old Lungtan is about half a mile from here. And so he's in the south now. And he knows that what's starting to spread around here is this sudden awakening school, which conflicts with everything he's learned and trained in and prepared himself for, and he's here to prove how completely off it is, and he's been here for all of about 10 minutes, and the tea lady just shoved his face in it. So I think this is a very... So he says, okay, so he's probably half sort of like, oh, well, good, there's someone around here so that I can go prove them wrong. But I think he's also about half, I may be in trouble. So it says here, arriving at Lungtan's place, Deshan was utterly defeated. And I suspect that by the time he got to Lungtan's place, he was already defeated, because he was in this, he had been bested, he had been taught already by the tea lady, the nameless, wish we knew who she was. And the one way we can really look at this is to maintain or to sustain the sort of animosity of these two schools, the rivalry. And we can look at it in a way that's very competitive and combative and say, oh, the sudden enlightenment school definitely got one over on the gradual enlightenment school there. And maybe when I was younger, I definitely, I think I would have viewed it this way. And now, the way that I view this is, it was an act of utmost kindness. She didn't follow up and sort of say like, stick that in your pipe. She responded. She asked him a question. She responded to his question, and she just let it ferment. Chew on that. In fact, I think it was probably the best meal he got at that stand. And when he arrived at Lungtan's place, he was already off balance. And so I'm sure that an experienced master, it doesn't really detail here, was easily able to sort of like push him back and forth. Now, what happens though, it says, the rest of this commentary says, his earlier words certainly did not match his later ones. So there was a big transformation that took place when he went to go see Lungtan. His earlier words did not match his later ones. Before this event and after this event, something changed between those two. Lungtan disgraced himself in his compassion for his son. And here we have that family talking, and you've got this person coming who's out to destroy you. And how is he received? What's the transformation that happens here? Finding a bit of live coal in the other, he took up muddy water and drenched him, destroying everything at once. Viewing the matter dispassionately, you can see it was all a farce. So we have Lungtan and Deshan meeting, at meeting. And Deshan wanting to question, wanting to probe, wanting to prod, wanting to pull apart Lungtan's teaching, his understanding, and his approach to the Dharma, believing it to be completely false. But he's already had this interaction with a humble tea house woman that's shaken him to the core. So the it's reversed order. So that happens, and then this happens. So Lungtan, instead of viewing him as an enemy, allows him to come to his quarters, likely after his responsibilities as the abbot are finished for the day. So, it's dark. Actually, it says it's dark, so it's probably not dark when he arrives. He says, "Oh, welcome, come on, let's go talk." And so they go back and forth for hours. Deshan visited Lungtan and questioned him sincerely far into the night. It grew late, and Lungtan said, "Why don't you retire?" Deshan made his bows and lifted the blinds to withdraw, but was met by darkness. It's dark outside. So Lungtan lit a paper candle. Paper candles, like you just take a piece of paper and you twist it and makes it burn slower. And he lights it and he hands it to him, offering him a light. And when Deshan's about to take the light from Lungtan blows it out. Why? These are the parts of the stories that you need to chew on. At this, Deshan had a realization, and he talks about why. Lungtan asks, "What truth did you see?" What is it? I think sometimes when we're in practice or when we're in relationship or we have such an insight, there's an expression on our face like it's the aha or the oh shit or the and these masters, when you see it, you say, oh, what is it? Can you express it right away? Deshan says, "From now on, I will not doubt the words of an old priest who is renowned everywhere under the sun." Well, that's a change. That's a remarkable transformation, I would say, when in a moment, in the space of, who knows, a couple of days maybe, he's gone from being committed to the destruction of the whole school, the embarrassment of all of the participants thereof, and the establishment of the true school, to being in a position where he's unabashedly praising this person who he's basically just met. The question is, and I think what's important about this and where the sort of drama comes in, is where are you in this story? Have you ever felt yourself so committed to being absolutely right that you're willing to go on a mission to prove that's right? Have you ever been so committed to put yourself at risk and in great effort in order to make sure that things are done right? And if you have, then hopefully you can identify with Deshan. And you can identify with the mind and the heart space of being there. And you can understand that when you're in that space, when you're so full of sureness, when you're so absolutely convinced, you hopefully can understand how difficult it is to turn, to change even a little bit, let alone to completely reverse direction and be able to go the other way. That's a very difficult thing to do. Based on what? Based on an individual interaction, based on an experienced moment of sort of pristine relationship. This is what I love about this interaction between him and the old woman, is it's like he's slipped almost into autopilot mode and the old woman is totally there and catches him. And he knows it, and it changes him. And then the interaction with Lungtan is one of affirming through question after question, being brought back, being met, not with, if you bring the desire to have your right, and you're met with kindness, and you're met with truth, and you're met with love, this is transformative. And you have this experience where you are emptying out all of the vitriol, and you're emptying out all of the anger and all of the mission and all of the attachment, until what's left is just this vast spaciousness. And I think this is what's happening here when Deshan says, "From now on, I will not doubt the words of an old priest who is renowned everywhere under the sun." And from the perspective of a teacher, I can say that would be something to behold. As a teacher, you commit your life to working with people on transformation. One of the core values of our organization is transformation, commitment and transformation. And so, as a teacher, we commit to giving our whole effort to provide a place and a teaching and a community and relationships and all of the supports we can to support and encourage people to come and embrace this practice for the function or for the purpose of transforming, awakening. So I can only imagine the impact on Deshan or on Lungtan to have this person come in, teeth gritted, a wagon full of stuff, wanting to stomp you out, and to watch that transformation in just a few hours to being one of, oh, this is not what I thought at all. In fact, it's almost the opposite. So the next day, Lungtan took the high seat before his assembly and said, "I see a brave fellow among you monks. His fangs are like a sword tree. His mouth is like a blood bowl. Give him a blow, and he won't turn his head." I know this because the tea lady hit him hard, and he kept coming. There was something underneath that. It wasn't just the mission that he came for. It was something underneath that kept him coming. Someday he will climb the highest peak and establish our way there. This is high praise. Deshan brought his notes and commentaries on the Diamond Sutra before the Dharma Hall and held up a torch. All of his, I'm imagining Kido, with like a, if you took all the documents on Kido's computer and printed them all off for the past, I don't know how many years of school he's been in school, and you loaded them all into a cart, and that was the only copy of them. What would it take for you to light them on fire? Probably, maybe not much. Held up a torch saying, "Even though you've exhausted the abstruse doctrines, it's like placing a hair in vast space. Even though you have all of the knowledge of the Diamond Sutra, it's like a hair in space. Even though you've learned all the secrets of the world, it's like letting a single drop of water fall into an enormous valley." And he burned up all his papers. Then, making his bows, he took leave of his teacher. Isn't that interesting? He took leave of his teacher. Wu Man's verse says, "Seeing the face is better than hearing the name. Hearing the name is better than seeing the face. He saved his nose, but alas, he lost his eyes." So I'm sorry for talking so long, and I hope you're not all too sore. But the reason I wanted to take the time is that this material is like the way that it's set up or the way that it's delivered is distilled. It's like very concentrated. And the story of our family, the story of our ancestors is deep and rich and full. But one of the challenges that I find in teaching Zen in general, koans in particular, is that we can't be approaching this like watching an episode from time to time. I don't know. I'm trying to think like a Mumonkan geek. And if we're going to explore the stories of our family, I would ask that all of us really engage with the fullness of that story so that we can really enjoy, appreciate, and learn from the richness and the vastness of the tradition, the stories of our family.